The morning light barely filtered through the thick curtains Samantha had insisted on hanging in my room. For better sleep, she'd said then. But I knew she just didn't want me waking up too early and making noise, as she called it. I'm 73. I've been waking up at 5 in the morning most of my life, a habit left over from my days as chief accountant for the Kelly Market retail chain. 34 years of the same route. Early rise, cup of strong tea, newspaper, and then the office, figures, reports. Boring life, Paul, my daughter's husband once said. He never realized that the numbers had their own poetry. Every column, every reconciliation told a story. By debits and credits, I could tell the health of a company better than any doctor. But explaining this to a man whose job is to promote information solutions, whatever that means, was useless. I slowly got out of bed. My old knees predictably ached. Not bad enough to go to the doctor, but enough to remind me that I didn't have much time left. On the bedside table was a photograph of Catherine, my wife, who had left this world 3 years ago. Putting the kettle on quietly, I pulled out my mug, an old one with our company logo on it, given as a 50th birthday present. Samantha had hinted several times that it was time to throw it away. It doesn't fit in, her daughter explained when she decided to update the kitchen in Scandinavian style. But it was my mug, my little territory. While the kettle boiled, I looked out the panoramic window at the backyard. The house was beautiful, spacious. 3 bedrooms, a living room with a fireplace, a modern kitchen, and a small, manicured garden. When Samantha and Paul had decided to buy it, they couldn't afford such luxury, not with Paul's salary and Samantha's job as a freelance translator. "Dad, we need help," Samantha said then, squeezing her husband's hand. "We found the perfect house for all of us, with a room for you." After Catherine's death, I felt lost in our large, suddenly empty house. The idea of living closer to my daughter and grandson seemed like salvation, especially since the young family really needed help. Catherine and I sold our house and gave the money for a down payment, a substantial amount. In return, we agreed that I would live with them, help pay the bills, and occasionally watch Benjamin, my grandson, when he came home from school while his parents were still at work. Things were fine for the first few months. Samantha took care of me. Paul was friendly, and Benjamin was happy that Grandpa was always around. I felt needed, part of the family. But slowly something started to change. At first it was the little things. "Daddy, can you not turn the TV up so loud? Daddy, you left your pills on the table again. Richard, could you please not occupy the guest bathroom for so long in the morning?" The kettle boiled and its whistle brought me back to reality. I made tea and sat down at the table, pulling my notebook out of the drawer. Despite all the digital technology, I preferred to keep track of my expenses the old-fashioned way, with pen on paper. It gave a sense of control, and control was something I was slowly but surely losing in this house. "Up at the crack of dawn again?" Samantha's voice sounded suddenly harsh. I looked up. My daughter stood in the doorway, already dressed for work. At 42, she was still a beautiful woman, inheriting her mother's high cheekbones and expressive eyes. But now those eyes looked at me with a slight irritation. "Good morning, darling," I smiled. "Sho, I didn't mean to wake anyone." "Benjamin needs his sleep before the test." She opened the refrigerator. "And your walking around woke him up." I looked at the clock. It was only 7 in the morning, and I knew for sure I'd move silently. "I'm sorry," I said, deciding not to argue. "I'll be more careful next time." Samantha sighed and pulled out a yogurt. "It's not your fault, Daddy. It's just, you know how sensitive Benji is. Probably senses your energy or something." I suppressed a smile. My grandson Benjamin, a tough 13-year-old boy, was into soccer and computer games. The only thing that would wake him before the alarm clock was the smell of fresh pancakes or a new video game. But once again, I remained silent. "What do you have planned for today?" Samantha asked, softer now. "The usual stuff. I'll go to the store, read, maybe stop by Frank's." Frank Morris was an old friend of mine from when I was working. Retired like me, but unlike me, he lived alone in a small apartment near the center of town. We met once a week to play chess and talk about the past and present. "Just don't stay out too late." Samantha was spreading avocado on her toast. "Mashtari, we have guests coming over tonight, and I need you to keep an eye on Benjamin." I frowned. "Guests? You didn't say." "I mentioned last week. She didn't look at me. Paul's co-workers. Important meeting. And what about dinner? We'll order in. You don't have to worry. I slowly closed my notebook. Samantha used to always invite me to join the guests. Now I was being sent upstairs like an inconvenient piece of furniture that needed to be put away before important people arrived. I understand, I said quietly. Of course I'll keep an eye on Benjamin. Thanks, Daddy. She kissed me quickly on the cheek and glanced at her watch. God, I'm late. Tell Benjamin his breakfast is in the fridge. And she ran off, leaving me alone in the kitchen. I finished my tea thinking about how our relationship had changed. Samantha had always been a goal-oriented girl. Unlike me, who loved precision and order, she was a dreamer, a passionate person. She changed hobbies, friends, jobs. The only thing that remained constant was her desire for a brighter, more fulfilling life than her parents had. When she met Paul at some state-of-the-art technology conference, I was excited. He seemed like an ambitious young man with clear plans for the future. Just the kind of partner my high-flying daughter needed. Catherine then also approved of her daughter's choice, and a year later they were married. Benjamin came along 2 years after the wedding. I still remember the moment when I first held my grandson in my arms. Tiny, with a flushed face, but even then with piercing blue eyes like Catherine's. My musings were interrupted by a stomp on the stairs, and a moment later Benjamin flew into the kitchen, disheveled and sleepy. Good morning, Grandpa, he plopped into the chair across from me. Ah, morning, champ, I smiled, looking at the only person in the house who was still genuinely happy to see me. Ready for the test? No, he groaned. I hate chemistry. Mom said your breakfast was in the fridge. Benjamin grimaced. Is that awful protein smoothie again? No, thanks. I looked around and winked conspiratorially. I have a better idea. 10 minutes later, we were both sitting in front of plates of scrambled eggs and toast. Benjamin devoured his breakfast with gusto, and I watched him warmly. He was a good boy, smart, kind, and despite his teenage years, still open to talking to his old grandfather. Grandpa, is it true that you helped Mom and Dad buy this house? He suddenly asked. I almost choked on my tea. How do you know that? He shrugged. I heard them talking last night. Mom said something like, he helped us with the house, we can't just... And then they noticed me and stopped talking. I slowly set the mug aside. Yes, I helped them with the down payment. It's common for parents to help their kids. So this house is partially yours? Benjamin's eyes widened. Not exactly, I mumbled, not wanting to go into the details of my agreement with Samantha. The important thing is that we all live together as a family. Cool, he said without much interest, his attention already on his phone. Oh, I'm late for the bus. Bye, Grandpa. And he took off, leaving behind some uneaten toast and scattered napkins. I got up and started to clear the table. Cleaning up after the others was another of my new responsibilities in this house. You're home all day anyway, Samantha explained when she decided to forgo the services of a housekeeper coming in. After washing the dishes, I went up to my room to change. When I'd first moved in, this room had seemed cozy, small but bright, overlooking the garden. I had brought only the bare necessities and a few memorabilia. Now it seemed smaller and more cramped. Some of my belongings were gradually moved to the garage, to make room. My books, once taking up an entire closet in the living room, were now boxed up. Collecting them for the school library, Dad. Charity event. I got dressed and looked at myself in the mirror. Gray hair, wrinkles around my eyes, but my posture was still straight. Years of working with numbers had taught me how to keep my back straight. An accountant should look as safe as a bank, my first boss used to say. The phone rang. It was Frank. Richard, old boy, how about a game of chess today? I'd love to, I replied, feeling my mood lighten at the thought of seeing my friend. I'll be at your place by 11. Frank was more than just a friend. He was a witness to my past life. A man who remembered me as a respected professional, not just an aging father in need of money and babysitting. Stepping out of the house, I took a deep breath of fresh fall air. The day promised to be warm. I decided to walk to the bus stop, an extra opportunity to stretch my legs. On the way, I watched my neighbors. Young moms with strollers, elderly couples walking their dogs, office workers hurrying to work. The ordinary life of an ordinary suburb of Melbourne. I once dreamed of such a peaceful old age, living close to my family, walking familiar streets, being part of a community. The reality turned out to be different. I felt like a stranger, not only in my daughter's house, but also in the neighborhood. Neighbors nodded politely, but no one stopped to talk. I was just Samantha Foster's dad, or the grandfather of the boy in the 32nd house. On the bus, I sat by the window and pulled out my phone. There was a message from Samantha. Dad, don't forget to buy milk on the way home. Not a what's up or have a good day. Just another errand. I sighed and tucked my phone back into my pocket. Frank greeted me with a genuine smile and a firm handshake. His apartment was small but cozy, filled with books, photos, and souvenirs from the trips he'd taken since retiring. You look glum, old friend, he said, pouring us both a whiskey despite the early hour. Trouble in paradise? I'm not sure it was ever paradise. I accepted the glass. It's just getting harder and harder. We sat down at the chessboard and I told him about the growing tension in the house, how Samantha and Paul were increasingly excluding me from family matters, how their attitudes were changing. You've given them too much credit, Richard. Frank shook his head, making a move. I told you at the time, you should have made it legal. They're my family, I countered, though I knew in my heart he was right. I couldn't require them to sign the papers. Had to tell them, family is family and money is money. Frank was blunt. He'd been a CFO all his life and was used to calling things by their proper names. You gave them most of your savings. What do you have left? I told him about my remaining savings, my pension, small investments. Enough to live modestly, but nothing more. Frank rubbed his chin. Mashachum, how much do you put into their household budget each month? I said the amount, and his eyebrows went up. It's almost a third of your pension. I live with them. That's fair. It's fair to pay for your room and not maintain the whole house. We continued the game in silence. I considered not only the chess moves, but also my friend's words. Perhaps he was right. Perhaps I had allowed my daughter and son-in-law to use me. Nanawanarni. Checkmate, Frank said an hour later. You're distracted today, Richard. Something to think about, I smiled and began to set up the pieces for a new game. Another round? By late afternoon, walking home with a carton of milk, I was contemplating my situation. Maybe I should have talked to Samantha directly. Explained that I was feeling increasingly alienated, but something told me it wouldn't work. In my daughter's eyes, I'd gone from a pillar to a liability, and no amount of words would change that. As I approached the house, I noticed several expensive cars in the driveway. Paul's guests had already arrived. I quietly entered through the back door, trying not to attract attention. In the kitchen, Samantha was arranging appetizers on plates. Oh, Daddy, you're back. She gave me a quick glance. Benjamin's in his room. He needs help with his science project. Of course, I put the milk in the refrigerator. I'll be up to see him. And Dad, she lowered her voice, please don't come downstairs. This is an important meeting for Paul, potential investors. I nodded silently and went upstairs, feeling like a shamed child being sent to his room to keep out of the way of the adults. Benjamin was excited to see me. His project was on ecosystems, and I helped him make a model of a rainforest. We worked for hours, and I was grateful to my grandson for the opportunity to feel useful and needed. From downstairs came voices, laughter, and the clinking of glasses. The party was in full swing. Once I went down to the kitchen to get water and heard a snippet of conversation. And how are you coping? Some woman was asking. Taking care of an elderly parent is such a responsibility. It's not easy, Samantha answered with a heavy sigh. But what can you do? Family is family. I froze, stunned. To take care of me, I was completely independent, taking care of myself, helping around the house and with my grandson, contributing money to the budget. What kind of care were we talking about? Back in Benjamin's room, I couldn't concentrate on the project. I kept thinking about my daughter's words, her tone tired, martyred, as if I were a cross to bear, not a father who had given her most of his savings. When Benjamin fell asleep, I quietly left his room and headed for my room. As I passed the master bedroom, I noticed the door was ajar and the light was on inside. Samantha and Paul had apparently gone upstairs for a moment during the party. We're going to have to decide something soon, Paul said. We can't live with the three of us forever. I know, Samantha's voice sounded strained. But what do you suggest? He's my father. There are great nursing homes, with medical care, entertainment. He'll be better off there. I froze, unable to move. A nursing home? They were discussing how to get rid of me? He wouldn't agree, Samantha countered. You know him. Then we'll have to convince him. After all, this is our home. I backed away quietly and went back to my room, feeling my heart pounding in my chest. Our home, after everything I'd put in? After all the promises? Sitting in the dark, I truly realized my situation for the first time. I wasn't just an unwelcome guest. I was an obstacle to their plans that they wanted to get rid of. Something inside me snapped. I had been a judicious man all my life, avoiding conflict, always giving in for the sake of family peace. But now in my 73 years, I felt for the first time that I had to stand up for myself. I pulled out my phone and texted Frank, "You were right. I need legal advice tomorrow." "Know anyone?" The reply came almost instantly. "Sure do, old buddy. My niece Hannah is a great lawyer. I'll bring you to her tomorrow." Putting the phone down, I felt strangely calm. I wasn't going to give up without a fight. If Samantha and Paul had forgotten about family values and gratitude, they would have to remember their legal obligations. After all, I hadn't worked with contracts and numbers for 34 years for nothing. I knew the value of words in paperwork, which I thankfully did formalize before handing over my money. Meeting Hannah Bird, Frank's niece, left me with a dual feeling. On the one hand, I had received legal confirmation of my rightness. The contract I had drawn up when I had given the money to Samantha had been properly executed. On the other hand, the very fact that I had consulted a lawyer about my relationship with my own daughter was bitter. "Mr. Blackwell," Hannah said after reviewing the documents, "your position is solid. The house legally belongs to your daughter, but you have a lifetime right of occupancy. Besides, the clause for repayment in case of breach of the agreement is clearly spelled out." I nodded, remembering how I had insisted on that clause. At the time, I had thought it was just a formality. "I hope it won't go to the extreme," I replied, "but thanks for the advice." As I drove home, I pondered how I should proceed. Confrontation had never been my style. All my life I preferred to solve problems quietly, to find compromises, to seek peaceful solutions. But now there seemed to be no compromise in sight. The house was quiet, a rarity on a weekday. Usually Samantha worked on the computer in the living room, translating some technical texts, and Benjamin did his chores in his room after school. Today, however, the house seemed empty. On the refrigerator I found a note. "Dad, took Benji to practice. We'll be back late. Don't wait up with dinner." I sighed. Another party I wasn't invited to? Or really a training session? I'd begun to doubt my daughter's words for some time now, and this was the most painful aspect of our current predicament. Deciding to take advantage of the solitude, I sank into a chair in the living room, a privilege I'd rarely allowed myself lately. It was the seat Paul usually occupied after work, and my presence there felt almost like an intrusion. I turned on the TV and switched to the documentary channel. The program was about coral reef life, colorful, soothing, just what I needed for my agitated state. Not 20 minutes later, the front door swung open and Samantha flew in, laden with packages. When she saw me in the chair, she froze for a moment and then smiled a strained smile, I thought. "Daddy, I didn't expect to see you here." I stood up, helping her with the bags. "Where's Benjamin? Is practice over already?" Samantha hesitated for a split second. "Oh, Paul picked him up right there. They went to the movies. Men's entertainment, you know." I understood, of course. I knew I was being lied to again. My grandson loved to take me to the movies, and if there were plans for such a trip, he'd be sure to call. "I see." I picked up a few bags. "Let's take these to the kitchen." The bags were from expensive clothing stores. Samantha loved shopping, but lately she was always talking about the need to save money. "I found a sale," she explained, catching my eye. "Almost everything is 50% off." "It looks expensive, even at a discount," I said softly. My daughter's face changed instantly. Her smile disappeared, her eyes narrowed. "Dad, I work, and Paul works. We can afford to buy something once in a while." "Of course, honey, that's not what I meant." I pulled back, feeling a familiar heaviness in my chest. Any hint of their finances instantly turned Samantha into a defensive predator. "What did you mean by that?" She crossed her arms over her chest. "Are you going to lecture me about frugality again? About how you and Mom saved every dime you had? I shook my head. No, Samantha. I just noticed that shopping looks expensive. And you also noticed that I lied about working out, right? Her voice sounded accusatory. I saw the look in your eyes. I remained silent, not knowing what to say back. The confrontation I was trying so hard to avoid had found me. Dad, I'm a grown woman, Samantha continued, raising her voice. I have my own life, my own plans, my own budget, and I don't have to account to you for every move I make. I'm not asking for an account, I tried to say calmly, but when you leave a note with a direct deception— Deception? She was almost screaming now. Huh, God, Dad. I just didn't want you to worry or feel excluded, and you call it cheating. At that moment, the door opened again, and Paul walked in, alone. He looked tired after a day at work, but quickly assessed the situation. What's going on here? Nothing, I answered, trying to lighten the mood. Samantha and I are just talking. Dad's accusing me of lying, Samantha blurted out. Paul gave me a cold look. Really, Richard? That Richard instead of Dad, as he'd sometimes called me before, was another reminder of the chasm growing between us. No, I shook my head. I was just asking about Benjamin. The note said something about training. Oh, that, Paul waved his hand. Yeah, there's been a change of plans. I picked him up from school and we drove to the office. I wanted to show him where Daddy worked. Right now, he's at Jacobs, a friend of his. I'll pick him up at 9. A new lie compounded with the previous one. Samantha's texting about practice. Paul's talking about going to the office. And where is my grandson, really? I get it, I said quietly. Thanks for the explanation. I turned to leave for the kitchen, but Paul's voice stopped me. By the way, Richard, we wanted to talk to you about something. I turned around. Samantha, big, I said cautiously, and expensive. It's an investment in our future, Paul said with the confidence of a client presentation. The house will increase in value by at least 30%. And where do you plan to get the money for this renovation? I asked bluntly. Again, we exchanged glances. We have savings, Samantha answered without looking me in the eye. And the bank is willing to give us a loan. Another loan? I frowned. You already have a mortgage. Daddy? Samantha sounded annoyed. We can handle everything, but there's just one thing. What's that? The renovations are going to take months, Paul interjected. It'll be impossible to live in the house. And you want me to move out temporarily? I already knew what they were getting at. Not necessarily, Samantha said quickly. We're thinking of renting an apartment together during the renovation, but it's going to be a lot smaller and more expensive than our current mortgage payments. So there you have it, the pitch for more money. And you want me to increase my contribution to the budget? I asked bluntly. That would be fair, Paul nodded. The renovation will be good for all of us after all. And you'll be living in a renovated house. The next night, when Benjamin was at a friend's house for a study project, Samantha and Paul brought up the renovation again. But now they decided to take it even further. Dad, Samantha sat down next to me on the couch. We've thought about it for a long time and decided that instead of renovating, we'd rather buy a new house. A new house? I couldn't hide my surprise. What about this one? We'll sell it, of course, Paul said, sitting across from me. The market is booming, and we could make good money. I stared at them, trying to make sense of the situation. They want to sell the house I helped them buy? The house I was entitled to live in for the rest of my life according to our agreement? And where will I live if you sell this house? I asked bluntly. With us, of course. Samantha smiled a little too broadly. You'll have your own room in the new house, smaller than here, but with your own bathroom. And where's the money for this new house coming from? I already knew the answer, but I wanted to hear it from them, again with the looks. We need your help, Dad. Samantha took my hand. If you add to the down payment, we can afford our dream house. How much? My voice sounded dry. Paul named an amount that amounted to almost all of my remaining savings. I looked at both of them and realized they weren't kidding. They really expected me to give them the last of my money, forfeit my legal rights to the place, and settle for a smaller room in their new house. I need to think about it, I said finally. This is a big decision. Sure, Dad, Samantha kissed my cheek. But don't take too long. We need to give the sellers an answer by the end of the week. After they left, I sat in silence for a long time. When did my daughter turn into this mercantile person? When did money become more important to her than family relationships? The next morning I called Frank. They want to sell the house and buy a new one, I said when we met at his apartment, and they want me to give them practically everything I have left. And you're going to go along with that? Frank looked at me intently. Of course not, I shook my head. But I don't know how to tell them that. I don't know what to do next. What about your right of occupancy? It's on the deed to the house, isn't it? Yeah, but if they sell the house, they'd be in breach of your agreement, Frank finished, and they'll have to give you your money back. Plus compensation, if I remember correctly what you said about the agreement. I nodded. Frank was right. Under the terms of our agreement, if Samantha decided to sell the house without my consent, she was obligated to pay me back the amount of the down payment, adjusted for inflation. It was a substantial sum that would allow me to buy my own place and live independently. I think you should talk to Hannah again, Frank suggested, and prepare all the necessary documents, just in case. That same day I visited Hannah's office again. She listened to me carefully and agreed to prepare all the necessary legal documents. Then I went to the bank where I met with my longtime acquaintance, the account manager. I want to make changes to the access to my accounts. I explained my situation to him. And to prepare certain measures in case things with my daughter escalated. The manager nodded understandingly. Apparently such situations were not uncommon in his practice. Returning home, I felt strangely relieved. For the first time in a long time, I had taken control of the situation. I was no longer a helpless old man dependent on the mercy of my children. I had a plan. In the evening, Samantha and Paul brought up the subject of the new house again, showing me pictures and describing how wonderful our life there would be. I listened to them with a smile, not giving away my thoughts. Let them think they had convinced me. I needed time to finalize my arrangements. So what do you think, Dad? Samantha asked at the end of their presentation. Will you help us with the down payment? I'll think about it, I answered evasively. Let's talk in a couple days. At night I couldn't sleep. Thoughts of the upcoming confrontation with my daughter kept me awake. I loved Samantha with all my heart, despite her selfishness and mercantilism. She was my only child, a part of me and Catherine. But I couldn't let her and Paul use me anymore. In the morning, I met with Hannah to sign the prepared papers. Then I called the bank and activated the first part of my plan. Now we just have to wait for their reaction, Hannah said as she shook my hand goodbye. Be prepared for them not to be happy. I was prepared. In my years as an accountant, I'd learned to calculate risks and prepare for the worst-case scenario. And now I was prepared for the possibility that my relationship with my daughter could completely collapse. It was a high price to pay, but a price for my dignity and independence. 2 days after our conversation about the new house, Samantha and Paul invited me to a family meeting. Their solemn tone immediately alerted me. Usually such meetings meant that they had already made up their minds and were just going to put me on the spot. We settled into the living room. Paul took his favorite chair, Samantha sat next to him on the armrest, and I sat on the couch across from him. It was a classic negotiation pattern. Them as a united front, me as the lone opponent. Dad, Samantha began without preamble, we need to have a serious talk about our finances. I nodded silently, waiting for her to continue. The situation is this, she took a deep breath. Paul and I have calculated our expenses for the past few months, and your contribution isn't enough. Not enough? I raised my eyebrows. For what exactly? General expenses, Paul interjected. Utility bills, groceries, home maintenance. Everything's getting more expensive, Richard, and your share stays the same. I chuckled mentally. 3 times in the last year, I'd increased the amount I'd given them for common expenses. Each time they found a new reason. Inflation, Benjamin's special needs, roof repairs. My contribution to the budget had long since exceeded reasonable limits. I thought we discussed this 2 months ago, I said calmly. Then you said you wouldn't need another raise until at least the end of the year. Samantha glanced at Paul. Such a direct answer wasn't part of their plans. Dad, circumstances have changed, she tried to speak softly, but there was impatience in her voice. Benjamin has extra math classes now. The car needs repairs. And we're thinking about a vacation, remember? A vacation to Bali, I clarified. without me. We've already explained why you should stay home. Samantha was getting annoyed. This has nothing to do with our conversation. It does, I countered. You're asking me to increase my contribution to the budget, part of which will go toward a vacation I'm not participating in. Paul stepped forward. Richard, let's not get off topic. The fact is, your pension isn't enough to cover all your expenses. My expenses? I couldn't believe my ears. What expenses? You live in our house, Paul began. You use electricity, water, heating. You eat the food we buy. You watch TV that we pay for. With each word, his tone became more and more accusatory. I could feel the anger building up inside, but I tried to stay calm. Let me remind you, I said, choosing my words, that I'm paying for my stay here, the amount we've agreed upon, which I increase regularly at your request. It's not enough, Paul cut me off. Prices are going up, and your share must be in line with the real costs. And how much do you consider to be fair? I asked bluntly. Samantha gave a figure that amounted to almost 70% of my pension. I stared at her in silence, trying to see a bit of embarrassment or doubt in her eyes. But no, she was absolutely sure she was right. It's impossible, I said at last. I don't have enough for my medicine and personal expenses. Daddy, Samantha sighed, as if explaining the obvious to a small child. You don't understand. We're not just on a whim. We really need this money. For what? I tried to understand her logic. For the new house you want to buy? For a vacation to Bali? For a normal life? She raised her voice. So that you don't have to count every penny like you and Mom have all your life. For Benjamin to have everything he needs to grow. Benjamin already has everything he needs, I pointed out. And more. You don't understand, Samantha shook her head. The world has changed. What was a luxury in your time is now a necessity. I looked at my daughter and didn't recognize her. When did she become so materialistic? When did money and status become more important to her than family values? I can't give you that much, I said firmly. It's unrealistic. There was silence. Samantha and Paul exchanged glances again, the usual signal that they were moving on to a prearranged plan B. Then perhaps we should consider other options, Paul said slowly, as if treading carefully on thin ice. Options that would be beneficial to all of us. What options? I already knew where he was going with this, but I wanted to hear it from him. There are excellent nursing homes, Paul said in a businesslike manner, as if he were discussing the purchase of a new refrigerator. With medical care and active social life, a lot of people your age prefer that option. A nursing home? I tried to make my voice sound surprised, although I was inwardly ready for the suggestion. It's not what you think, Dad, Samantha interjected, seeing the look on my face. Modern nursing homes are like resorts, swimming pools, libraries, hobby groups. And how much does it cost to stay in such a resort? I asked, already knowing the answer. Your pension should be enough, Paul answered without blinking an eye, especially if you sell your remaining investments. That's it, the final part of their plan. Move me out of the house and take the last of my savings. What about our agreement? I looked right at Samantha. When I gave you the money for this house, we agreed that I would live here with you. Dad, that was 3 years ago. Samantha waved her hands. Circumstances have changed. We'd all be better off if you moved to a place where professionals could take care of you. Where I'll be taken care of on my own dime, I clarified. Richard, Paul sighed with feigned patience. Let's face it, you're getting older. You're 73. Who knows what health problems you might have in the coming years? Samantha and I are not medical professionals. We can't give you the care you need. I've been doing fine on my own so far, I said, and I haven't demanded any care from you. Not yet, Paul emphasized, but that would change sooner or later. I looked at them both and saw that they had already made up their minds. For them, I was not a member of the family, but a financial burden to be gotten rid of in the most favorable way possible. When are you planning on moving me? I asked, trying to make my voice sound doomed. Samantha brightened when she thought I was giving up. We found a great place just 20 minutes from here. We can go see it tomorrow, and the move. Well, maybe in a month? We need to take care of the formalities. I understand. I slowly got up from the couch. Give me some time to think about it. It's, unexpected. Of course, Dad. Samantha came over and hugged me. We're not rushing you. We just want you to feel good. I nodded and went to my room, feeling their gazes on my back. Closing the door, I sat down on my bed and took a deep breath. So, the cards were revealed. They were no longer hiding their intentions. I spent the entire evening pretending to contemplate their proposal. Dinner with them, discussing the weather, the news, Benjamin's school progress. A normal family evening, except for the heaviness in the air. Before I went to bed, I stared at Catherine's picture for a long time. What would she say when she saw what our daughter had become? What would her advice be? Protect yourself, Richard. It was as if I heard her voice. You've always been too soft on Samantha. It's time to show some character. In the morning, after Samantha and Paul left for work and Benjamin left for school, I pulled a pre-prepared travel bag from under my bed. I put the essentials in it: clothes, medicine, documents, a few memorable photos. The rest could wait. Then I called Hannah. I'm ready to activate our plan. Are you sure, Mr. Blackwell? The young woman's voice sounded concerned. It's a big step. I'm absolutely sure, I answered firmly. They've offered to move me into a nursing home. I understand, she said with a professional tone in her voice. I'll prepare the documents and deliver them today. The next call was to the bank. My familiar manager, Timothy, listened to me carefully. Everything is ready, Mr. Blackwell. On your signal, we will activate the security measures. Activate them, I said firmly. And thank you for your help, Timothy. Always a pleasure, sir. Good luck to you. Last call was to Frank. I'm leaving tonight. Can I stay with you for a couple days? Sure, old buddy. Frank spoke cheerfully, but I could hear the worry in his voice. Wakita, my apartment is your apartment. How long are you planning on staying? A week at the most, I answered. Then I'll get a hotel room or find a temporary place to stay. We have to wait for things to settle down. Are you going to leave them a note? Frank asked. No. I shook my head even though he couldn't see it. Hannah will deliver all the necessary documents. They'll say more than any note would. Finished talking, I looked around the room once more. My room for the past 3 years. It was strange to realize that I might never come back here again, but there was no choice left. I walked out of the house, closing the door quietly behind me, and headed towards the bus stop. The day was overcast with a light rain drizzling down. The weather matched my mood, sad but determined. On the bus, I pulled out my phone and texted a quick message to Samantha. I need time to think. I'll be in touch. That should have given me a head start of a few hours before they started to worry. Frank welcomed me with open arms. Welcome to my bachelor pad. Make yourself at home. Thanks, friend, I smiled, relieved to have someone around who really cared about me. I hope I'm not embarrassing you too much. Come on, he waved his hand. I'd even enjoy having a roommate, especially a neat one like you. We settled into his small but cozy living room. Frank poured us both a whiskey, even though it was still daytime. Here's to a new beginning. He raised his glass. And here's to your children getting what they deserve. To justice, I nodded, taking a small sip. We were sitting there discussing the details of my plan when the phone rang. It was Hannah. Mr. Blackwell, the documents have been delivered. I personally delivered them to your daughter. How did she react? I asked, feeling my heart clench despite all my determination. She was surprised, Hannah replied diplomatically. She said she'd get back to you right away. Thank you, Hannah, I sighed. You did a great job. Not 5 minutes later, the phone rang again. This time it was Samantha. Dad, her voice sounded panicked. What's going on? Some lawyer came over with some documents. What is this all about? Did you read the documents? I asked calmly. Yes, but there's some kind of mistake. It says you own the house, and that our accounts are blocked. It's not a mistake, Samantha. I tried to speak smoothly, without emotion. The house does belong to me. It always has. But we're paying the mortgage. She was almost screaming. You're paying me, I explained. The money I gave you for the down payment wasn't a gift, it was a loan. It's in the papers you and Paul signed 3 years ago. The deeds to the house are in my name, and you're paying me the cost of the house in installments. There was silence. I could almost see Samantha trying to make sense of the information, to remember exactly what she had signed then, in the rush and joy of buying a new house. It's not fair, she finally squeezed out. You cheated us. No, darling, I objected. I was just protecting myself. And rightly so, as time has shown. What about the accounts? Her voice shook with anger and fear. Why are they blocked? Because you violated the terms of our agreement, I answered. You tried to evict me to a nursing home, even though you promised that I would always live with you. That activated the protective measures. But we didn't evict you. We just offered the option of... Samantha, I interrupted her, let's not lie to each other. You decided to get rid of me a long time ago. First, you wanted to move me to a smaller room. Then you talked about renovations, then a new house, and now you've suggested a nursing home. It's all an attempt to get rid of me and get access to my money. There was silence again. Then I heard muffled voices. Apparently, she was discussing the situation with Paul. Where are you? She finally asked. We need to talk in person. I'm in a safe place, I answered, and I'm not ready to see you yet. Dad, you don't understand. There was a note of desperation in her voice. We have debts. We can't go without access to our accounts. I know about your debts, I said. Credit cards, consumer loans, credit cards, loans. You're living beyond your means, Samantha, and you're using me to fund your whims. They're not whims, she raised her voice again. This is a normal life, something you and Mom could never afford. Those words hurt my heart. Catherine and I worked our whole lives to make sure Samantha had a happy childhood, saving money on ourselves, but never on her, and that's how she saw it. A normal life doesn't include cheating on your parents and trying to put a roof over their heads, I said quietly. What would your mother say if she saw what you'd become? Nafracha, don't you dare bring Mom into this, Samantha shouted. She would understand me. No, honey. I shook my head, even though she couldn't see it. She wouldn't understand, and I don't understand. What do you want? Samantha asked after a pause, more reserved. What do you want? Justice, I answered simply, and the respect I deserve. And how do you envision that? Should we apologize? Beg you to come back? No, I sighed. I'm not coming back. But I'm willing to discuss the terms of our continued coexistence. In a week, when you've both come to terms with the situation. A week? Samantha was outraged. Dad, we can't wait a week. We have payments to make, bills to pay. All the necessary bills will be paid, I assured her. Food, utilities, Benjamin's school. But no frills, no restaurants, shopping, or entertainment. A week. I heard Paul say something in the background and Samantha handed him the phone. Richard, his voice sounded strained, but he tried to keep his tone businesslike. Let's be reasonable. What you've done could be construed as financial abuse. We can go to the police. You can, I agreed. But then all the documents you signed would come to light. All the agreements you broke, and more terms that will be fair to all parties. And until then, do we have to sit around with no money? You will have access to a limited amount, enough for basic needs, no excesses. He hesitated, searching for words. That's unacceptable. It's reality, I argued, a reality you have created by your own actions. I heard Samantha pick up the phone again. Dad, please, let's talk, now, in person. No, honey, I was adamant. I need time to think, and so do you, in a week at the earliest. But where did you go? There were tears in her voice. You're not on the street, are you? I'm safe, I assured her. Don't worry about me. How could I not? You're my father. Did you remember that when you planned to send me to the nursing home? I asked quietly. She was silent. There was nothing to answer. One in a week, Samantha, I repeated, and tell Benjamin I love him. Tell him Grandpa's gone for a while, but he'll let me know soon. I ended the call and looked at Frank, who had heard the whole conversation. He silently handed me a glass of whiskey. You did good, Richard. It's about time you put them in their place. I took the glass but didn't drink it. There was a strange mixture of emotions inside. Bitterness, relief, determination, and regret. I had done what I had to do, but it didn't make it any easier. Do you think they'll understand? I asked Frank. Eventually, yes, he shrugged. When they realize that not everything in this world can be bought or manipulated. When they realize that respect has to be earned. I nodded, hoping he was right, hoping that this painful lecture would help my daughter and her husband become better people, or at least more honest. That night, I struggled to fall asleep on the fold-out couch in Frank's apartment. Thoughts of Samantha, Paul, and Benjamin kept me awake. I imagined them thrashing around the house right now, discovering they couldn't pay their credit cards. How Samantha was crying with anger, and Paul was frantically searching for legal loopholes. How Benjamin wondered where Grandpa had disappeared to, but there was nowhere to retreat. I'd made a decisive move, and I had to follow through. For myself, for my dignity, and ultimately for the sake of my family, who needed to learn respect and honesty. I spent the next 2 days in Frank's apartment, hardly ever going outside. I didn't want to risk a chance encounter with Samantha or Paul. Melbourne is a big city, but our neighborhood isn't that big. Plus, I needed time to think, to calmly analyze the situation and decide what to do next. I turned my phone off as soon as I talked to my daughter. I knew she would call constantly, begging, demanding, threatening. I didn't need all this emotional swinging. I left only my email on so I could stay in touch with Hannah in the bank. On the third day, a message arrived from Timothy at the bank. Your daughter and son-in-law have visited the branch 3 times in 2 days, demanded that the accounts be unblocked. Explain that this is not possible without your authorization. They are very upset. I mentally pictured the scene. Paul in his business suit, trying to exert authority on the bank employees. Samantha ready to cry or throw a tantrum. Once such a picture would have made me rush to their aid immediately. Now I just felt tired. Had they called you yet? Frank asked me at dinner when I told him about the message from the bank. I don't know, I shrugged. The phone's off. Reasonable, he nodded. But you're going to have to talk to them sooner or later. In a week, I reminded him. Just like we agreed. Are you sure they can handle a week? Frank grinned. Apparently they were used to living large. They'll make it, I said calmly. They've got the money for the basics. And if they don't know how to budget, now's the time to learn. Frank chuckled approvingly, but I could see the worry in his eyes. How are you holding up, old man? I wondered. How was I feeling? A strange combination of relief and anxiety. Relief that I was finally in control, that I was no longer a victim. Anxiety because I didn't know where my decisive action would lead. I'm fine, I finally answered. I'm worried about Benjamin, though. I'm afraid he's getting a kick out of my parents for leaving me. You should go see him, Frank suggested. The boy needs to know that you haven't abandoned him. You're right, I nodded. But how do I arrange a meeting without Samantha and Paul finding out? Does he have a cell phone? Text him directly. The idea was risky, but the right one. I couldn't let my grandson feel abandoned or betrayed. Turning on the phone, I saw the expected. 15 missed calls from Samantha, 8 from Paul, dozens of messages with variations from "Daddy, please let's talk," to "This is crossing the line. If you don't call back, we're going to the police." Ignoring them, I texted Benjamin. Hey champ, it's Grandpa. Could you meet me tomorrow after school? It will be our secret. I promise to explain everything. The reply came almost instantly. Grandpa, where are you? Mom and Dad are freaking out. Of course we'll meet. Where and when? We arranged to meet at a park near his school. Then I turned off the phone again. Now until tomorrow. I'll see my grandson tomorrow, I told Frank. I hope he'll understand. Kids often understand more than we realize, Frank smiled, especially when it comes to honesty and fairness. The next morning I woke up early, feeling unusually excited. Meeting Benjamin seemed both necessary and anxious at the same time. What would I tell the boy? How would I explain the situation without making his parents look bad? Frank had already prepared breakfast. Eat up, old boy. You're gonna need your strength. Thanks, I smiled, grateful for his support. I don't know what I'd do without you. Same thing, only in less comfortable conditions, he winked. You've always been stronger than you realize. Just let your daughter sit on your neck for too long. Maybe he was right. My whole life has been spent trying to avoid conflict, to find compromises, to give in. It made me a good accountant and peacemaker in the family, but it didn't teach me how to protect my boundaries. After breakfast, I went to the park, choosing a route on which I was unlikely to meet anyone I knew. It was a sunny, warm day, the last days of Australian fall before winter set in. I arrived early and found a secluded bench under a large eucalyptus tree. Sitting there, I watched the other park visitors. Young moms with strollers, elderly couples, lone joggers. Ordinary everyday life, in which my problems were only a small part of the big picture. At exactly 3 o'clock, I saw Benjamin entering the park. He was in his school uniform with a backpack over his shoulders and looked anxious. I waved at him, and he noticed me and quickly made his way to my bench. "Grandpa," he hugged me with unexpected strength. "I was so worried." "I'm sorry, champ." I stroked his head. "I didn't mean to bother you." Benjamin pulled away and looked at me. "What's going on? Mom and Dad are like crazy. They're yelling at each other. They're on their phones all the time. And when I ask about you, they say you're temporarily gone, but they won't explain where or why." I sighed, so they hadn't told him the truth. What else did I expect, though? "Sit down," I patted the bench beside me. "It's a complicated story." Benjamin sat down, keeping his eyes on me. At 13, he could already listen and analyze like an adult. "Your parents and I had a disagreement," I began gently, "about the house and the money. They wanted you to move into a nursing home," Benjamin said suddenly. I heard them discussing it. I looked at my grandson in surprise. "What do you think about that?" "I think it's unfair," he frowned. "You helped them buy a house, and now they want to get rid of you." "You've heard a lot, haven't you?" I smiled sadly. "The walls are thin," Benjamin shrugged, "and they've been fighting a lot lately." I nodded, not knowing what to say. I didn't want to turn my grandson against his parents, but I wasn't going to lie to him either. "You know, Benjamin, sometimes adults make mistakes," I said finally. "Your mom and dad, they're good people, but they got confused. They want too much too fast. They talk about money all the time." Benjamin looked at his hands. "About what to buy, where to go, and then they fight because they don't have enough money." "How often do they fight like that?" I asked worriedly. "It used to be rare," he answered. "Now it's almost every day, especially after you left. Dad yells that it's all Mom's fault, that she made you angry, and Mom yells that he's the one who ruined everything with his grand plans." I sighed. I knew they were going to start laying the blame on each other. "What's going on now?" I asked. "At home, I mean." Benjamin shrugged. "They're running around the house like crazy. They're calling everyone, asking to borrow money. Dad even wanted to sell his watch collection, but Mom said they'd get pennies for them now." I shook my head. The situation was developing as expected, but it still hurt to hear how my family was suffering. "How are you holding up?" I looked at my grandson with concern. "They're not taking it out on you?" "No," he shook his head. "They hardly notice me at all now. They're busy with their own problems all the time. My mom even forgot to pick me up from school yesterday, so I had to drive myself." That worried me. Samantha was always an attentive mother, despite her shortcomings. "Listen, champ," I put my hand on Benjamin's shoulder. "I know it's hard right now, but it's only temporary. Things will get better soon, I promise. Will you come home?" There was hope in his eyes, I didn't lie. "I don't think I'll come back to live with you, but I'll always be there for you. I'll always be your grandfather, no matter what happens between me and your parents." Benjamin nodded, accepting my answer. He was surprisingly mature for his age. "Why don't you answer their calls?" he asked. "They call you every 5 minutes." "Because we all need time to think," I explained. "Sometimes when people get too excited, talking doesn't help. It just makes things worse. In a few days, when everyone has calmed down a little, we can sit down and talk about it." "I understand," Benjamin nodded. "Like a timeout in soccer, when you need to cool down and collect your thoughts." "Exactly," I smiled at his comparison. "Very well put." We sat in silence for a while, watching the park around us. Then I pulled an envelope out of my pocket. "Here, this is my new temporary SIM card. You can call me anytime if you need anything. Just don't tell Mom and Dad," he finished for me. "I got it, our secret. It's not forever," I hastened to explain. "Just until we solve our problems." Benjamin nodded, tucking the envelope into the pocket of his school uniform. "Would you like some ice cream?" I offered, wanting to cheer him up a little. "Sure." He perked up, becoming a carefree kid again for a moment. We spent another hour in the park, eating ice cream, talking about school, soccer, his friends, everything but family problems. I was grateful for this respite, and I could see that Benjamin needed it too. When it was time to say goodbye, he hugged me tightly again. "Please make things soon," he whispered. "Things are not right at home without you." I promise we'll fix everything. I squeezed his shoulders. Just be strong, okay? He nodded and waved goodbye, walking toward the house. I watched him go, feeling heavy in my heart. Benjamin didn't deserve to be dragged into adult problems. But alas, children often had to pay for their parents' mistakes. Back at Frank's apartment, I told him about the meeting. Smart boy, he remarked, and observant. It was good of you to talk to him. Yeah, I nodded, but I'm worried about him. Samantha and Paul seem to be so busy with their own problems that they're forgetting about their son. It's only temporary, Frank poured us some tea. Once the initial shock wears off, maternal instincts will take over. I hoped he was right. Samantha had always been a good mother, despite her flaws, but stress can change people, make them forget to prioritize. That night, sitting by the window in Frank's apartment, I thought long and hard about the nature of family relationships. How often we take our loved ones for granted, forgetting to thank them for their love and support. How easily money and material possessions can overshadow what is truly important. Samantha has always been a driven, ambitious person. As a child, she dreamed of a beautiful life, of traveling, of things that Catherine and I did not have. I understood her aspirations and supported her as best I could. But somewhere along the way, her healthy ambition turned into insatiable greed, a constant pursuit of status and external glitter. And now, faced with financial difficulties, she and Paul did not unite, but began to blame each other. Apparently, their marriage was not as strong as it seemed from the outside. Perhaps they were united only by common material interests rather than real feelings. The thought that my daughter's family might fall apart because of my decision was painful. But deep down, I knew that if their relationship could not survive the ordeal, then it was doomed. Sooner or later, the financial bubble would burst, and the consequences could be even worse. Benjamin is the one I was really worried about. A smart, sensitive boy caught between two warring sides. But maybe this would be an important life lesson for him too. A lesson that you can't build happiness on material possessions, that honesty and mutual respect are more important than any money. I decided that whatever decision Samantha and Paul made after our conversation, I would be there for my grandson. I would support him, help him, and be the example for him that I hoped I had been for Samantha all these years. Frank interrupted my musings by suggesting a game of chess. I gratefully accepted. It was a great way to take my mind off my heavy thoughts. You know, he said, setting up the pieces, whatever happens tomorrow, you've already won. You've shown them that you can't be treated like a doormat. That's important, Richard, especially at our age. I nodded, making my first move. I just hope this isn't a Pyrrhic victory. I'd hate to lose my daughter in defense of my dignity. If you lose her over this, Frank looked me in the eye, then you lost her a long time ago. You just didn't want to admit it. His words were harsh, but fair. I'd done what I had to do. The rest was up to Samantha and Paul. Would they reevaluate their priorities, admit mistakes, start living within their means? Or would they continue to chase the unattainable, sacrificing real values for illusions? I was to get the answers to these questions tomorrow. In the meantime, I could just enjoy a game of chess with a good friend and at least for a while forget about the family drama in the center of which I unexpectedly found myself. Exactly a week after I left home, as we had agreed through Hannah, we met with Samantha and Paul. I'd chosen the venue, a small cafe in the business center of Melbourne. Neutral territory seemed the best option for such a difficult conversation. I arrived early enough to get a comfortable table in the corner, away from the other customers. I ordered a cup of tea and waited. Despite my outward calmness, a storm of emotions was raging inside me. I realized that this conversation could change our relationship with my daughter forever. For better or worse, it depended on how much she and Paul realized their mistakes. When they entered the cafe, I barely recognized them. Always impeccably dressed and groomed, they now looked wrinkled and haggard. Samantha had lost weight, shadows under her eyes. Paul, who usually exuded self-confidence, seemed depressed. "Daddy!" Samantha rushed to me, hugging me tightly. "Finally! We've been so worried." I gently hugged her back, noting the genuine joy in her voice. Perhaps a week of financial instability had made her reevaluate some things after all. "Hello, darling." I pulled away gently. "Paul," I nodded to my son-in-law, who discreetly shook my hand. We sat down at a table. Paul ordered a double espresso, but Samantha didn't even look at the menu. Apparently, she didn't care. Daddy, she began as soon as the waiter stepped away. First of all, I want to apologize. I behaved terribly. It's unforgivable. I looked at her carefully, trying to see how sincere those words were. Samantha's eyes were a mixture of remorse and something else. Fear? Calculation? We're both to blame, Paul interjected. Richard, the way we've been treating you lately, it was wrong. We realize that. You have? I raised my eyebrows. And what exactly did you realize? Samantha and Paul looked at each other. It was obvious that they had prepared this conversation in advance, rehearsed their words. That we took you for granted, Samantha replied. That we were ungrateful. You've done so much for us, and we were selfish, Paul finished. I nodded, sipping my tea. What do you suggest now? There was that exchange of glances again. We want you to come home, Paul said with feigned sincerity. On the best terms, of course. Yet, what kind? I decided to listen to their proposal before I announced my decision. Your room will stay with you, Paul began. No talk of moving out or going to a nursing home. We'll keep your share of the expenses to a minimum. And of course, no more secret plans behind your back. Dad, Samantha took my hand. We really want to make this right. Benjamin misses you so much. We all do. I looked at my daughter, trying to see in her eyes the little girl I once taught to ride her bike. The little girl I read bedtime stories to. The little girl I did homework with. Somewhere deep inside that tormented woman, she was still my Samantha, my only child. But at the same time, I saw a different Samantha, a calculating Samantha, used to getting what she wanted by manipulating others. I miss you too, I said finally, especially Benjamin, but I'm not going back to the house. What? Samantha looked genuinely surprised. Why not? I mean, we apologized, we promised. It's not about apologizing, Samantha. I shook my head. It's not about promises. It's that you and I can't live under the same roof anymore. It's not working. But where will you go? Paul asked with ill-concealed concern. You don't have another place to live. I'll rent an apartment, I answered. Or maybe I'll buy a small one. I have the money. Dad, that's crazy, Samantha exclaimed. You're 73. You can't live alone. Why not? I grinned. I'm in good health, fully independent, and, as it turns out, quite capable of taking care of myself. But we're family. There was a note of desperation in her voice. A family should be together. Family is more than just living together, I said. It's respect, care, support, all of which I'd been missing in our home lately. Samantha lowered her eyes. Perhaps for the first time in a long time, she truly realized how hurt I was by her attitude. We can fix this, she said quietly. Give us another chance. I saw. And then a month later, you saw your friend's new doll and said you didn't want the bike anymore. I continued. That you want a doll just like it. Samantha lowered her eyes in embarrassment. I was a kid. Yes, you were, I agreed. And I don't blame you for being childish. But then there was college, which my mom and I paid for by denying ourselves a lot of things. There was the wedding that took all of our savings. There was the down payment on your first apartment. What are you getting at? She sounded annoyed. My point is that all your life you've taken my support for granted, I answered bluntly. I've always been there for you, always helping. And when I found myself in a vulnerable position, what did I get in return? Plans to send me to a nursing home. It wasn't a nursing home, Samantha objected. Finally, the price is listed here, taking into account the down payment I made and all the payments you've made over the years. You take out a new mortgage and pay me my share in a lump sum. But, that's a huge amount of money, Paul exclaimed, looking at the figures. Where are we going to get that much? From the bank, I shrugged. Like all people who buy a house. Or you sell the house and buy something more modest, something that matches your actual means. And the second option? Samantha asked cautiously. The second option, I sell the house myself. I pulled out the next document. As the legal owner, I pay you back all the payments you've made over the years and we part ways. You look for a new place to live, and I'll look for mine. Samantha and Paul were silent, digesting the information. Their faces expressed a mixture of shock and confusion. But it's not fair, Samantha finally squeezed out. You can't just sell our house. I can, I said calmly. I own the house. It's in the papers you signed 3 years ago. You just didn't read what you signed carefully. But we paid the mortgage. Paul was indignant. You were paying me, I explained. According to our agreement, I gave you an interest-free loan to buy the house, which you gradually repaid. I owned the house until it was paid off in full. And you knew all along that you could sell the house at any time? Samantha sounded disbelieving. And you didn't tell us? I didn't plan to sell, I answered honestly. I planned to live with you, to help with my grandson, to be part of the family, until you decided to get rid of me. There was silence again. I could see Paul thinking frantically, searching for a way out of the situation, and Samantha struggling with the emotions that were tearing her apart. Anger, fear, resentment. You have a week to think about it, I pushed the folder to their side. Consult with the lawyers, with the bank, make a decision. I expect your answer in a week. A week? Paul shook his head. Sirman, that's too little time for such a serious decision. You don't have any more time, I was adamant. I can't stay at a friend's house or in a hotel forever. I need to organize my life. What about Benjamin? Samantha suddenly asked. Will you just disappear from his life? It was a painful question, and Samantha knew it. But I was ready. Of course not, I shook my head. I will see him as often as I can. If you won't interfere, of course. We won't, Samantha said quickly. He loves you. And I love him, I smiled, thinking of my grandson. But we both know it's better for his own good if you and I live apart. There's too much tension and conflict. They were temporary, Samantha objected. We'd work it out. No, I shook my head. They weren't temporary. They were escalating every day, and they would continue to grow until there was a real crisis. Paul, who had been silent for some time, suddenly asked, what if we give up both options? What then? Then I'll sue, I answered simply, for the forced sale of the house and the division of the property according to our agreement. Believe me, it's not good for you. The legal fees, the publicity, the time. Plus, all your loans and financial irregularities will come to light. Paul went pale. As I thought, he valued his reputation too much to allow a public scandal. We'll think about your proposal, he said after a pause. We'll give you an answer within a week. Daddy, Samantha looked at me with pain in her eyes. Is it really that bad? Is there really no way to fix it? I sighed, looking at my daughter with tenderness and sadness. It's not about fixing things, Samantha. It's about recognizing reality. You and I are different people, with different values, with different ideas about life. And that's okay. But we can't live together anymore. Because of the money? She seemed genuinely surprised. This is all about money? No, I shook my head. The money is just a symptom. The real problem is deeper than that. The lack of respect, the different priorities, the inability to talk honestly with each other. Samantha lowered her eyes, perhaps for the first time really thinking about what I was saying. You're right, she said quietly. I haven't been able to talk to you for a long time. I'm always hiding something, not telling you, manipulating. I was surprised by this sudden honesty. Why? I asked. When did it start? Samantha hesitated. I don't know. Maybe when Mom died, or before, when I got married and felt I had to prove to you both that I could be successful, wealthy. You never had to prove anything to us. I took her hand gently. Mom and I have always been proud of you, regardless of your accomplishments or mistakes. I know, she smiled weakly. I know now. But back then, I thought success was measured by a beautiful house, an expensive car, trips abroad, all the things you never had. And what do you think now? I asked with interest. That I was a fool, she grinned bitterly, chasing after false values, ruining my relationship with my father, jeopardizing my marriage and my son's well-being. I saw Paul tense at the mention of marriage. Apparently they were really in trouble, and not just financially. It's not too late to rethink things, I said softly. To start living within your means, to focus on the things that really mattered. Will you help me? Samantha's eyes flashed with hope. Advice? Support? Of course, I smiled. I'll always be there for you, even if we don't live under the same roof. Paul, who had been silent until then, suddenly asked, what if we choose the second option? If you sell the house yourself, how much money would we get? Typical Paul, always thinking in terms of profit and loss. Enough to buy a smaller place and start with a clean slate, I replied. No debts or loans. And the first option? He continued to analyze the situation. How realistic is it for us to get such a large mortgage loan? With your current income and credit history? Unlikely. I was honest. But it's up to you. Maybe you have other sources of financing. Then the choice is obvious, Paul nodded to himself. The second option. We start over, debt-free. Paul, Samantha was indignant. We haven't decided anything yet. We need to discuss everything, to calculate. Samantha, be realistic. His voice sounded tired. We have no chance of getting a mortgage of this size. The second option would at least get us out of debt. I watched their argument with a slight sadness. Even now, at such a critical moment, they couldn't agree, couldn't support each other. Discuss everything at home. I stood up, signaling that the conversation was over. You have a week to decide. Daddy, Samantha stood up too. Can I come to you tomorrow? Alone, just to talk. I was surprised at the request. Sure, call me and we'll arrange a time and place. We said goodbye. Samantha hugged me tightly and Paul shook my hand discreetly. Watching them walk away, she with slumped shoulders, he with a tense back, I felt a strange combination of sadness and relief. It hurt to see my daughter so depressed, but at the same time I knew I had done the right thing. Sometimes people need a harsh lesson to start changing. Back at Frank's apartment, I told him about the meeting. Shuktatun. And how did they take your terms? He asked, pouring us whiskey. Better than I expected. I accepted the glass. Samantha even admitted some of her mistakes. Sincerely, Frank looked skeptical. I think so, I nodded. Partially anyway. She herself asked to meet tomorrow, alone. Be careful, Frank warned. She might try to manipulate you. Play on your father's feelings. I know, I sighed. But she's still my daughter. And if there's a chance to mend our relationship, I have to take it. Frank nodded understandingly. We sat in comfortable silence, each of us immersed in our own thoughts. The next day I met Samantha at the same cafe. She came alone, as promised. She looked better than she had the day before, like she'd showered, changed her clothes, even put on a little makeup. But her eyes were still tired. Daddy, she said, I came to tell you that I accept your decision. You're right. It's better for us to live separately. I was surprised at her bluntness. What about Paul? Is he okay with it? He's going to have to agree, she said with a steely tone. We had a serious talk last night. Very serious. What did you come up with? Samantha took a deep breath. That our marriage isn't as strong as it seemed. And it's not just the money. It's just that the money has sharpened everything, brought it to the surface. I kept quiet, giving her a chance to speak. We decided to try living apart, she continued, after we sell the house. Paul will rent an apartment. Benjamin and I will find something small. Are you sure that's what you want? I asked cautiously. No, she smiled sadly. I'd like things to be the way they used to be. A big, beautiful house, a cloudless future, a happy family. But it was an illusion we maintained at the cost of debt and lies. It was time to face the truth. I was struck by the maturity of her words. Maybe the financial crisis had really made her grow up, reevaluate her priorities. I'm proud of you, I said sincerely. Decisions like that take courage. Thank you, she smiled weakly. It was you. What you did made me think, make me look at myself, and I didn't like myself in that mirror. We talked for another 2 hours. Samantha talked about her plans, her fears, her hopes, about how she was afraid of disappointing Catherine and me, how she tried to succeed at any cost, how she'd gradually become entangled in debt and lies. I'll help you, I promised. Not with money, with advice, with support. I'll help you find a place to live, pay off your debts, make a budget. I'd like that, she squeezed my hand. I need to relearn to live within my means, as you and my mother taught me. When it was time to say goodbye, Samantha hugged me tighter than she'd ever hugged me before. Thank you, Daddy, for not giving up on me, for giving me this lesson, even when it was painful for both of us. I love you, Samantha. I kissed her forehead. I always have and I always will, no matter what happens. I know, she smiled through her tears. I know now. On the way back, I thought about our conversation, about Samantha's confession, about her decision to try to live apart from Paul. Was it the result of a moment of desperation or a conscious choice? Would she really be able to change her lifestyle, her priorities? I didn't know the answers to these questions, but for the first time in a long time, I felt hope. Hope that we would all come out of this crisis better than we were. That evening, Paul called. His voice sounded surprisingly calm. Richard, I'm calling to tell you that we're taking your second option. Sell the house yourself. We'll start looking for a new place to live. Okay, I nodded, though he couldn't see it. Samantha told me about your decision to move out. Shanam. Yes, his voice was emotionless. I think it's best for everyone, especially Benjamin. I hope you two stay on good term, I said sincerely. For my son's sake. We'll do our best, he said. It won't be easy, though. After that conversation, I sat down at my desk and wrote a letter to Hannah, explaining our decision in detail and asking her to start the process of selling the house. Then I called a real estate agent I had worked with during my active career. We needed to find a new place to live, both for me and for Samantha and Benjamin. There was a long road ahead, selling the house, finding new apartments, dividing up possessions, adjusting to a new life. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was moving in the right direction. And perhaps by my decisive act, helped not only myself, but also my daughter to break out of the vicious circle of consumerism and false values. Time will tell how deep and sincere were her insights. But one thing I knew for sure was that I would never again allow anyone, even those closest to me, to violate my dignity or take advantage of me. At 73, I had finally learned to say no and assert my boundaries. Better late than never. It had been 3 months since Samantha, Paul, and I had made the decision to sell the house. It had been a warm and sunny summer in Melbourne, perfect weather for new beginnings. I stood at the window of my new apartment, watching the waves lapping against the sandy shore. The ocean view was one of the main advantages of this place, for which I was willing to sacrifice the extra meters and the novelty of the renovation. A small one-bedroom apartment in an old but well-maintained house in the coastal neighborhood of Melbourne became my new home, and I couldn't be happier. The sale of the family home went surprisingly smoothly. The real estate market was booming, and we got even more than we bargained for. After paying off all of Samantha and Paul's debts, there was enough money left over to provide each of us with a new, albeit more modest, place to live. I chose this apartment almost as soon as I saw it. A spacious living room with panoramic windows overlooking the ocean, a small, cozy bedroom, a functional kitchen, everything a single retiree needs. A bonus was a small study room where I set up my workspace. The doorbell interrupted my musings. I smiled knowing who it was. Saturdays at 11 in the morning, I had a traditional appointment. Grandpa, Benjamin burst into the apartment with an energy only reserved for teenagers. I brought a new game. You promised we'd play. Samantha came in behind him, looking tired but calm. Hi, Daddy. She kissed me on the cheek. How are you? Great, I smiled, happy to see them both. Just admiring the view. Still can't get used to living by the ocean. You're lucky to have this apartment. Samantha looked around. Every time I come here, I'm amazed at how bright it is. Benjamin was already on the couch, unpacking the game console he brought with him every Saturday. Mom, you're picking me up at 4, right? I have practice at 5. Sure, Samantha nodded. Dad, do you mind if I come back early? I have a meeting with a client at 2. After selling the house and breaking up with Paul, Samantha was fully immersed in her work. Her career as a freelance translator had suddenly taken off, perhaps because she was now putting all her energy into it, not distracted by the illusion of a perfect family life. Sure, I nodded. Benji and I are going to have a wonderful time. Samantha left, and my grandson and I settled on the couch, ready for our weekly game marathon. Despite the age difference, these hours together over video games have become a special ritual for us. Benjamin patiently explained the rules and tactics to me, and I, to his surprise, turned out to be a not-so-hopeful player. Years of working with numbers had given me good reactions and strategic thinking. How are things going at the new school? I asked when we took a break for lunch. After the move, Samantha had to transfer Benjamin to another school closer to their new home. It was one of the hardest changes for a boy, leaving friends, familiar surroundings. It's okay, he shrugged, munching on the sandwich I'd made. The teachers are good, and I've already made a couple of friends on the soccer team. How's your math class going? You said it's a tougher program. Yes, but I'm getting through it, he smiled. Sanam, your explanations are very helpful, Grandpa. I was proud of my grandson. Despite all the turmoil of the last few months, the move, the separation of his parents, the change of school, he had shown amazing resilience. Of course, there were difficult moments, tears, and angry outbursts, but overall, Benjamin was doing better than we all expected. How is Mom? I asked cautiously. She looks tired, Benjamin sighed. She works hard. Sometimes she sits on the computer until late at night. She says we need money. I nodded. Samantha had indeed faced financial difficulties after her breakup with Paul. Although I had helped her with the down payment on a small apartment and supported her financially on a regular basis, she had to work hard to support herself and her son. Do you see your daddy often? I continued. On weekends, Benjamin answered without much enthusiasm. Sometimes he takes me to his place for the night, but his apartment is so small, and he's always busy talking on the phone. I nodded understandingly. Paul had fallen on hard times too. His career had taken a hit after a financial scandal. Rumors spread quickly in Melbourne's business world. He'd had to change companies, accept a lower position and salary. Are they still fighting? I asked quietly, though I knew the answer. All the time, Benjamin grimaced. Every time Dad comes to pick me up, or on the phone, it's always about money or me. Who has to pay for school, for soccer, for clothes? I put my hand on his shoulder. It's a difficult time for everyone, champ. But it'll pass. Your parents love you. It's just hard for them right now. Benjamin nodded, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. 13 is a difficult age when kids start to see their parents as real people, with all their faults and weaknesses. Do you want to take a walk on the beach before we continue the game? I suggested, wanting to distract him from his sad thoughts. Sure, he perked up. Can I borrow your binoculars?